Hello and welcome to the CoSM Podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Mark Wooding, the creator of the YouTube channel After Skool. Mark's videos, which aim to enhance profound ideas through art, have regularly gone viral, being seen by millions of people around the world. Please welcome Mark Wooding. So I guess the first question, the most obvious one is, what is your genesis story? How did you get started with making these brilliant doodle videos on YouTube?
Well, it's hard to know where any story begins, but my parents were really encouraging, and they would throw down a pen on a piece of paper before I could even walk. So I'd crawl over, and I couldn't even hold a pen. I'd hold it in a fist, and I continued holding the pen in a fist up until like second or third grade. My teachers were trying to beat that out of me, but I realized I was a good artist in about first grade when I won this big art contest that I didn't even know I was entered in, and they brought in a trophy that was taller than me, and that kind of was the first validation I had as, oh wow, art could be my thing. And then in high school I started painting on people's shoes, and somehow that got into the newspaper, and that story kind of caught wind. And this was early, before people were painting on shoes. These were like old canvas vans, and yeah, I was always making art for friends, and I just did what I loved, and then followed my intuition. And I remember in college they would show these RSA animation videos that are like the first whiteboard animations that I ever saw, and I was really hooked. I was very captivated by them, and the teacher would just turn the lights off, play that video, and the whole class would just be fixated on one of these whiteboard videos. And I thought, maybe I let's give it a shot. I don't maybe I can try doing one myself, and it actually isn't too hard. You just record yourself drawing. So I began recording myself painting and drawing, and it was kind of cool because a lot of the art that I create is not permanent. It's either on a shoe and the shoe gets muddy later, or it's in chalk and it gets washed away. So what lives on is the video. The video is kind of what keeps the art going, and the videos promote themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
every time I'd make a video, I'd get requests to make more videos for people. And the first whiteboard animation I ever made was how to properly use condoms. And it got received really well because it kind of was able to explain a sensitive topic in a cute way without actually needing to hire actors or anything. So people really liked this format for explaining complex, sensitive things in a lighthearted way. And I worked as a freelancer for many years, and the clients got bigger and bigger until one day I kind of got screwed over. And it's funny because you never know if something's good or bad in the moment. It might seem bad in the moment, but later on it might turn into something great later. So me getting completely screwed over in business made me say, you know what, I'm done working for other people. Let me give myself a year to just make videos about things that I'm interested in. So I saw a whole bunch of YouTubers, and I was like, maybe I can do that. So that's kind of how After School started. And I'm just a really curious person, and I gave myself a year to kind of just pursue a passion project.
Mm. And so from the beginning, you saw this ability of your drawing kind of combined with narrating ideas as a very kind of synergistic way of delivering information.
Yeah, well, we're all different types of learners. Some of us learn through reading something or hearing something, or we have to actually do the thing. A lot of us are visual learners. So, I'm certainly not the best student, and I'm not the best reader, but I really have to do things and or visually experience them in order to learn them. So it was almost a way to educate myself. Like once I turned something into art, I didn't forget it. And hopefully maybe that's why it resonates with other people, because they're seeing it, they're hearing it, and with my hand drawing it, they can almost feel like they're doing it a little bit. So it
Mm.
kind of combines all the learning styles into one medium.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, it's a bit similar to, sometimes I will read a book and I'll also listen to the audiobook at the same time. and that really helps my comprehension. So it's just this like mix of different
Mm.
learning styles just in one delivery method. And I guess that is, in your estimation, is that what has made your videos so successful?
Well, I've had to reinvent myself a few times, but in the beginning, I was trying to do kind of cute little sciencey videos that, and in a way, I was reaching for what I thought people wanted to see. So I was always,
Mm.
okay, what's popular? And I may have been chasing things a little bit, and sometimes videos resonated with other people, but uh, there were some big policy changes from YouTube, and they called it the adpocalypse, where they really you had to make your content for certain audiences. This was in like 2017. And so at that point, I
Mm-hmm.
decided my content is not for kids anymore. And at that point, I reinvented myself and
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, my content is really for me. It's like the ultimate selfishness, but if it, I'm doing things that benefit my life the most and then sharing them with the world. And hopefully that will help others or resonate with others.
So you've mentioned being an artist almost as far back as you can remember, at least visually. But when was the first kind of, what first inspired you intellectually in terms of the kind of ideas you explore? What kind of philosophers or books really kind of set you on fire?
That's a great question. And I try to have guides in many domains of life, and in some ways, Alex Gray has been a huge inspiration in just visualizing things that are impossible to put into words. And I've he's been a huge influence. So I've found these people that I really admire in all sorts of domains. Like there's Paul Stamets in the mushroom field. There's Jordan Peterson in like the philosophical field, and there's Terrence McKenna in that same realm, and Alan Watts and Randall Carlson has been a huge influence in kind of like myths and legends and geology. So I've been doing trips with him. A lot of these guys were from the Joe Rogan podcast. So I used to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast a while ago, and that's where I got found out about quite a few of these people. Um, but now it's great because every day I'll get maybe 20 emails from people saying, "Have you heard about this person? Have you seen this talk?" And I try to check out everyone that they send my way. And now at this point, a lot of the suggestions are fantastic, and I use those.
Hmm. Yeah, it's great to hear your inspiration from Alex Gray because I see some similarities between his work and I think visionary art in general and your work in that it is kind of art as a delivery mechanism for meaning. If you look at a lot of Alex's pieces, it's a crystallization of a philosophy or an idea, and the art itself, in some sense, is diagrammatic. It tells a story in a single image. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what your videos are, quite literally, because you are kind of delivering these ideas and these philosophies through visual mediums.
Yeah, well, words are a little clumsy and they're easy to stumble over and they're very easy to misinterpret. But
Mm-hmm.
images can express millions of words in one image. Uh,
Yeah, and there's
yeah.
something inherently, I think, psychedelic about it too, because it is synesthetic. I when you're making these videos, I am seeing what you mean,
Hmm.
so it's kind of like this synesthetic way of delivering information. Again, that crossing wires of like learning styles.
Hmm. Yeah, I try to whatever the speaker is talking about or the script is saying. I try to take that literally and just if the script is talking about a white horse eating an apple, I'm going to draw a white horse eating an apple. I don't.
Hmm.
But occasionally you get to insert your own kind of beliefs and ideals into the art, and that's what makes it really spicy. And we're living in a time where there's a lot of content to work with.
I'll notice in your art too, you'll have like maybe reoccurring themes or characters or motifs. I love that you use the is it the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings as like this kind of I guess it's iconography. it's pop culture iconography that people see that, and then their minds, whoever is plugged into the pop culture, immediately sees that icon and knows what it means. So it's really cool that you're using, symbolism and iconography that people already kind of are familiar with to illustrate perhaps like a new idea.
Yeah, and I think that probably helps along the learning process because I'm not, I don't want you to get caught up on the images really. I want you to know very easily, oh, that's good and that's bad, without injecting too much of my own biases into it. But you see that ISR and instantly you're like, okay, that is not what I want. That is a bad reality. I don't want to go
Mm-hmm.
down that path. And then there's all sorts of other things that I add in. It's very colorless and everything's kind of like ordered in
Mm-hmm.
these like a very oppressive lines, and all the angles are sharp and straight lines, whereas like the good side is always this very natural, free flowing, lots of greens and blues that are calming, and then there's flowers and everything's kind of flowing, where the other side is the complete opposite. And it's like the yin and the yang. It's like the anti-hero
Mm-hmm.
clearly defines the hero.
Yeah, that it's a beautiful use of archetypes to kind of make art that acts out its meaning. Even if you weren't speaking about it as you were drawing it, I would know exactly what you meant by that art. And I would love to kind of get more into the kind of ideas you find yourself exploring these days. How has your kind of exploration of ideas evolved throughout your work?
That's a great question. um, it's kind of it's almost hard to put into words for sure. But in the beginning, I was kind of doing these cute little childish videos that I thought were charming. But I always, in the back of my mind, I had these like bigger ideas that I wanted to expose some of the greater truths and explore them myself, and kind of explore these big questions like, why are we here? Where do we come
Mm-hmm.
from? These really existential type ideas. I wanted to go down those paths, and psychedelics definitely furthered that along. And I got more comfortable just sharing these thoughts that were deep in my mind, thoughts that I probably wouldn't even express to
Mm-hmm.
my family or something, but now I was comfortable sharing them right there in front of the whole world. And so I guess during this weird pandemic period, I've been really exploring more of, um, have these things happened in the past, and what can we learn from some of the really horrible things that have occurred, because history repeats itself. So we are not in something completely
Mm-hmm.
new. So I've been investigating how we got out of situations similar like this. Human psychology is kind of predictable. So how do people react in these situations? And I've been going back like yin and yang. So I'll do a really dark video that exposes the pesticide industry and how it's ruining our health. And then I'll follow that with like a very light idea about how to find your purpose in life. And then, I kind of been going back and
Yeah.
forth. So
So the evolution is kind of from these like kind of original, almost maybe trivial ideas, perhaps, but like very fun and informative and entertaining, to you exploring more and more ideas that you feel are significant, specifically to the crossroads that we're in presently as a
mhm,
society.
right. And there's a lot of chaos going on. I feel like we're in this time of great turmoil, and the consciousness is shifting, and we're like a ship out in the ocean. The water's rough right now. So I'm kind of trying to make sense of things. And honestly, I don't know what's going on. Like if you ask me, I don't have any like
Yeah.
secret answers, but I am searching everywhere for these answers and things that do seem to make sense. And I've been looking deep into the past because it's hard to know what's true or not. But
Yeah.
how I kind of define things that are how I separate truth from falsities is that the truth seems to withstand the test of time. So I've been looking at
Hmm.
ideas that are really relevant to today that are old. And to me, those
Yeah.
are true ideas because they're still true. They were true then and they're true today.
Yeah, they've withstood the fires of decades of criticism. the
Yeah.
fires of time. And that's, that kind of brings me to uh, another question I wanted to ask you about the ideas you explore, because an interesting intersection that I've seen in the themes of the videos you create is that between psychedelics and this critical thought of culture and government and the psychosis of the collective. You've made videos exploring Brian Murarescu's Immortality Key, as well as the ideas and work of Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, Roland Griffiths, Graham Hancock, all these amazing psychedelic thinkers. And alongside these, you have videos titled Sever Yourself from the Matrix with Russell Brand, Divide and Rule with Vandana Shiva, Love Your Servitude with George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, along with your recent viral video, Mass Psychosis, How an Entire Population Becomes Mentally Ill, made in collaboration with Academy of Ideas, that has gathered over 3 million views in just 2 weeks. So there's a clear connection between psychedelics and this sort of counterculture philosophy. Terence McKenna famously said that culture is not your friend. And the pioneering psychonaut Aldous Huxley wrote the dystopian novel Brave New World. And we even call the psychedelic revolution of the 1960s the countercultural revolution. So, what do you make of the connection between psychedelics and the countercultural revolutionary spirit?
Well, for me personally, psychedelics makes things that traditionally have made sense no longer make sense. And it makes things that have never made sense suddenly make perfect sense. So you could look at nature, and before psychedelics, it's all a bunch of random chaos. And then you do psychedelics, and it's this perfect harmony, nature. And then, before psychedelics, society, everything society does and the government does is just, that's the way it is. And then you do psychedelics and you look at it and say, wow, you see all these things that just don't make sense, that don't add up, and that could be fixed or changed, or you kind of see it's like flipping channels. I think Ram Dass talked about this. It's like you can see things on different channels suddenly. You can change the channel, whereas the normal default state of consciousness that we're on is kind of like just one channel, and we see things every like very three-dimensionally, and we see people for their superficial things that they have or the material possessions that they own, whatever. So yeah, it makes you kind of aware of things that just don't make sense, and it makes you kind of call those things out.
It's interesting because it reminds me of a quote by Terence McKenna where he says psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong. And I think that is kind of the crux of why they're so dangerous for a society that may want to impose kind of rigid order onto the people, because psychedelics kind of give us this creative fire represented so well in Alex's flaming eye. Fire is this method of transformation. And that combined with consciousness represented by the eye, it represents this force of continual renewal that I think speaks through the psychedelic mind. And that seems to be kind of exactly what you're saying, where you look at things in a new way. You, to use the title of one of your videos, you sever yourself from the matrix.
Yeah, I remember an analogy that Michael Pollan gave that I think about, and I really love. Like, he said, our brain is like a ski slope with snow on it, and when you ski down
Mm-hmm.
it, you make tracks behind you, and that skiing is like a thought, and the tracks are like the
Mm-hmm.
neural pathways, and the more you ski down those tracks, the deeper the grooves get in the snow, and so that kind of path gets overused and overused, and it creates these very deep grooves, and that would lead to like an obsessive thought. So if you were a smoker, the thought of picking up that cigarette all the time would be like an extremely deep groove in your mind. And when you do psychedelics, he says it's
Mm-hmm.
like a fresh powder of snow that just, there goes, all the lines are gone, no more neural pathways, and then you create new ones.
Mm.
And that's, I think that's why it's so good at breaking addiction, because all of a sudden that neural pathway that was so deep is suddenly not there anymore. And you're like, I don't need that. I like that analogy.
Yeah. And of course, there's always a shadow side to everything. Sometimes those grooves have been very carefully carved and they might serve you well. There are certain habits that really serve not just the individual, but when on the collective, they serve the society. But when these things kind of tilt towards tyranny or evil, it's important to kind of hit erase and maybe start new. And that seems really to be something that you've been exploring in your videos. And what are some of the things that really made you kind of critical of culture? What kind of made you start to question, maybe our society's ski tracks need an avalanche covering them, you know?
Well, you got me thinking about my favorite quote of all time, and it's from Terence McKenna.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if you don't have a plan, you become a part of somebody else's plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the shortest quote that makes people just stop in their tracks. Whatever side you're on, whether you've done psychedelics or not, it's so true. And you realize in 1 second that if you, most of us, we live our life. I mean, I'm guilty of it for sure, but at least I'm aware of it now. We live our lives following impulses and operating on the subconscious. So if I'm at a red light, I can't bear to be with my own thoughts for 30 seconds. So I'll reach down and grab the phone. It's not a big deal. I'll grab the phone. Then I have 10 minutes. I'll grab the phone. Anytime there's a little break in my routine or whatever, I'm grabbing the phone. It doesn't seem like a big sacrifice, but then you look at your screen time and you're like, whoa, 3 hours a day? It kind of like the screen time slaps you in the
Mm-hmm.
face and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't have a plan. And so I became a part of those people that were playing on my impulses and my subconscious programs, which, it's more
Yeah.
difficult now because we used to have community and people to keep us in check. And now we're kind of alone and we've got all these incredibly manipulative people that know how to play on our emotions and our fears and our wants. And it's so hard to resist them. And, I'll tell people my screen time is 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the reaction I get a lot is like, oh, that's nothing. That's rookie. Those are rookie numbers. So
Mm-hmm.
my roommate, his screen
Yeah.
time's like over 10 hours. I'm like, how is that even possible? You're awake 16 hours a day. I don't even know how
Mm-hmm.
that's physically possible. So yeah, well, then you extract it out. 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, over a month is over a year, over your lifetime. That's an insane amount of time. And you think about what you could have done if you hadn't just given into the impulses and operated on those subconscious programs. If you're when you use your conscious mind, this is from Bruce Lipton that I love. Uh, Conscious mind is wishes and desires. So we have these things that we want in our life. We have these dreams that we want to aspire to. That comes from our conscious mind. But then if we're operating on our subconscious mind, we never get there. Unless you have automatic programs that are get you there automatically, which is very rare. If you were born a rich person and you have all these
Mm-hmm.
programs that make you get rich, then you can just turn off your mind and be rich somehow. But most of us don't have those programs. So that he says there's only two ways to
Yeah.
kind of train our mind to get what we want, and that's through repetition or hypnosis. Otherwise, I think
Mm-hmm.
subconscious is 95% and conscious is 5%.
It reminds me of a book by Douglas Rushkoff. The title is Program or Be Programmed. And it's this similar sentiment of like kind of take control over yourself or someone's going to come in and take control of you for you. And a lot of these videos you create are almost made in response to what you might be going through personally. because you also have a video on dopamine fasting, which is a really great illustration of kind of everything you talked about, of how kind of our technology and our media environment is constantly feeding on us and trying to tie our behavior and our impulses to it. People call cell phones a slot machine that you carry around in your pocket. And you saying that you've been dealing with the struggle with these technologies, and then I see in the videos you create videos that attack these ideas. We talk a lot at CoSM about art as medicine, how art can be medicine for the collective, but how the process of making art can also be medicine for the person who makes it. So, have you ever noticed any kind of like therapeutic effect, or kind of, you know, a way of metabolizing ideas that happens through the creation of these videos that you wouldn't have had otherwise, that helps not just the people who watch them but yourself?
The first thing that comes to mind is sacred geometry. I was going through some videos on your channel, and I noticed a lot of topics around sacred geometry. And when I first learned about sacred geometry, I thought, "Oh, that's neat." And then I took out a compass and I drew it. And the second I drew it, everything changed. Then it was
Yeah.
suddenly locked in my mind, and I was like, "Oh, wow! Now I understand why this is special." So once I drew it, it really became locked in my mind, and it changed for me. And so whenever I tell people about it, people are like, "That's cool, that's interesting." But I live right near by the beach, and I said, "Let's come down to the beach," and we take a stick and a rope and another stick, and we draw a circle, and then we go to the next circumference, and we draw another circle. And the second they start to really lay out, it starts with a dot, then it goes to a circle, then it comes to Vesica Pisces, Holy Trinity, and then they make the seed of life, and then they go around again, they make the flower of life, and then they go around, and eventually we've got Metatron's cube at the end, and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe I made that." And it really, I encourage everybody to draw it. It's not that hard. Just get a compass and a ruler, and so that's one thing that it is like therapy. In a way, there is something very meditative and therapeutic about drawing sacred geometry, and then you see it everywhere. Suddenly, you see it all over the place. But as it pertains to my
Mm-hmm.
videos, uh, it is a form of therapy and meditation. Sometimes several hours will just pass by, and I won't even notice. I'll be in that flow state on a video, and the encouragement that I've gotten is overwhelming. I think one of the greatest needs that we need as humans is the need to feel appreciated, and I feel utterly blessed because I get so many messages and emails and comments of appreciation. It's like overwhelming, and so that really like
Mm-hmm.
keeps me going. And I've gotten some messages that they're very heartfelt, some of them, and it's just surreal to think that a video that you created could change somebody's life in a way, like it could get somebody off of heroin, or
Yeah.
can persuade them to, or inspire them to start a company, and that company is doing well now, or it's just amazing. And it really is surreal.
How has that affected your art? Because all artists, they have the feedback loop between the art and the way the audience receives it. And both of those things kind of feed on each other. So, how has kind of the audience response or the success of some videos over others, how has it affected your kind of creative process?
Well, you'll go crazy if you read every comment, but
Yeah.
it is very important to listen to your audience and listen to people and learn from them, and not be tone deaf. So um, sometimes I'll put out a video that I think is 10 out of 10. I'll think it's my best work yet, and nobody will really engage with it. And then it's time to look at, okay, why didn't this video succeed? Was it the title? Was it not good? Was it the subject matter? And when you're really close to it, you're so emotionally invested in the project that you're like, why didn't it succeed? Well, why? But then maybe a few months go by and you look back and you say, yeah, that makes sense why that one didn't go off. I really didn't address their problems, or nobody cares about this particular issue. Like I made a video about climate
Hmm.
change, and it's kind of clear that people don't really care about it. They might say they do, but that video got, you can't know everything from just one video, but I did learn from that video that there are a lot more urgent, pressing problems than climate change. If you put out a list of your problems if you wrote down a list, climate change would probably be like not even on the list, you know? So
On the individual level, at
on your
least.
individual level,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. You got bills, you got health issues, you got
Yeah.
relationships, you got to eat and sleep. Climate change is way somewhere else.
Hmm.
So
So there's a kind of a matter of relevance for these videos. The videos, would you say the videos that have been most successful are the ones that might have the most kind of like personal resonance with an individual watching it, like the most amount of like personal takeaways?
it's hard to say because I cover so many different topics, and like my most popular video is why don't country flags use the color purple?
Hmm.
And that is so different from the mass psychosis video.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's hard to lump all the successful videos into one category, but I think that purple video, it's a question that when you see the question you need to know the answer. It's a question that you never thought of before, but once you see the question, you have to know that answer. So I think that's a very luring title, and then it gave them a very compelling answer. So I could see why that video took off. The mass psychosis video is just it. Like when I was working on that one, I knew it was going to be a hit. Like I could just feel it, and so
Mm.
I'm
Why?
taking. That's a good question. It's just so relevant. It's impossible to not see what's going on today and then compare it to that, and it's so true. And it's like it's one of those truths that is hard
Hmm.
to speak, but it's the most important. Like there's a quote from David Foster Wallace: "The most important truths are the hardest to speak about." And he tells this little story about fish and water. I don't know if you've ever heard that speech, but there's an old fish that
Mm-mm.
swims by these young fish, and the old fish says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" And the young fish say, "What the hell's water?" And it's like things
Yes.
that are all around you are
Yeah.
sometimes very hard to see. You can see it in others. Like we're not in the water, so we can say, "Oh, how do they not see the water?" But they're in it, so they don't see the water. So sometimes when you're in a situation, it's very hard to point it out. Just like the biggest thing I've learned from that mass psychosis video is that it's very easy to see mass psychosis in other people. It's very hard to see it in ourselves. So a
Hmm.
Trump supporter will think that the video is about
Hmm.
liberals. A liberal will think it's about Trump supporters. The comments kind of made me laugh because it was everybody thinks it's about the other side and not about them. And I wasn't trying to poke at,
Yeah.
at one side or the other. I was trying to stay neutral. But it's funny how people kind of project their own thoughts and biases and realities, and then make assumptions from there.
Yeah, it's a bit like a Rorschach blot, where people just kind of project whatever shape into the kind of chaotic, shapeless void. But it is also a testament to the universality of the ideas you explore. You've talked a little bit about finding kind of the deepest truths, the truths that withstand the test of time, and perhaps are the most ubiquitous truths as well. And when you really hit like a bedrock truth uh, like something like that, then anyone can see it through whatever cultural or ideological lens that they're wearing.
Yeah, and we're still feeling the emotional sting from totalitarianism. It's not that
Hmm.
far away. Like we talked in that video, we talked about witch hunts. Those are pretty far away. They're horrific and they're kind of crazy part of history to learn about, but we don't feel the emotional sting from that. Whereas totalitarianism is this bug that has inflicted us over and over again throughout this last century. Our grandparents experienced them. Uh, I was in Cambodia not too long ago, and I saw the killing fields, and where it's not even cleaned up. You can walk through these fields, and there's bones everywhere, and it's really chilling. Like I've never been in a place where I could feel the energy, such a traumatic, dark energy before, and it chills you to the bone to go to these killing fields in Cambodia. And it's not that far away. These bones, these skeletons are still there. They have clothes on them, and they're right there. You can walk through the field. It's not like a museum. And there's piles of skulls like 20 feet high. It looks like an Indiana Jones like ride at Disneyland or something. It doesn't look real, but it is real. And so there's lessons to be learned. You think that these things can't happen, and there's reasons why they don't happen. But right now, we're slipping into these. I like to be like really optimistic and prepare for the worst as well. So there have been signs that have concerned me that we're moving towards a totalitarianism type of way. But I am optimistic because those systems, even if they prevail, they don't last very long.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people make the point, like Aldous Huxley and George Orwell make this point, that we're always leaning towards these totalitarian systems. And I think it's Mark Twain has a hilarious quote. He says, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes." So these things kind of perennially come up almost just like waves. And one of the lessons that you had in your video with Aldous Huxley and George Orwell is don't let it happen. That there's this kind of individual responsibility that you have, that each of us has, to kind of identify the ills of society and use our kind of, I think, creative capacity as like a corrective mechanism. And I think that's a lot what you're doing with your art, and I think that it really is the power of art. The artist as shaman, artist as cultural shaman, that kind of sees the malaise of society and kind of makes art for the times that will help us be immune to any expression of evil, really. And I think that's exactly what you're doing in your videos.
Yeah, I guess something is resonating. So, I'm listening to this feedback loop that these ideas are resonating and they're hitting hard, and so I'm gonna keep doing them. And we're living in this crazy time of censorship. So I've kind of found a way to speak about the truth without saying the actual words of what's happening today. So, anybody with 2 brain cells can figure out what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to get censored, at least for now, because it's kind of like in this little cute gray zone. So
it's like the Trojan horse in a way.
A little bit. Yeah.
Well, hey man, thank you so much for kind of using your creative capacity to make medicine for the times and to make all of these really important and just entertaining ideas more visually appealing. And thanks so much for the work that you do. And it's an honor to speak with you on the podcast. I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really am a fan of you guys, and especially Alex Gray has been a huge influence in my art. And I really look forward to seeing what he puts out. And yeah, I'm rooting for everything you're doing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the CoSM Podcast. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on future offerings. To learn more about Mark and After Skool, you can follow the links in the description to this video. Check out shop.cosm.org for limited edition fine art prints, apparel, and other gifts. All proceeds support the opening of Entheon, Sanctuary of Visionary Art. See you next time.